Hello everyone, this is the first in a series of 3 Design Thoughts episodes analyzing single-player FPS games, from the old school to its staleness to the new renaissance. FPS has had a large impact on the industry and is still one of the most popular genres to this day in terms of multiplayer. That being said, the campaign versions had had a strange evolution over the years. Even as early as 1999 Quake 3 Arena, where certain games were foregoing a single-player mode at all. So, what makes a good FPS? A mediocre one? Where did it all start going down? Why are they coming back? We're here to explore all of that. As a future preface, you should watch this video before watching the other ones that will be released. And like last time, it would help if you have played at least a few of the games, but hopefully we can learn something regardless. Doom, a game that needs no introduction, and what we'll spend the majority of the time in this video on. So let's just get into what makes this icon hold up to this day. The first thing that Doom does marvelously is how it teaches you about the game in very subtle ways without interruptions. You might not even realize the lessons that Doom is trying to teach you because you really don't really stop playing the game. Outside of clear screens, there's almost no instructions for story, text prompts. So let's go through E1 M1 in the first room. You spawn with a weapon in hand. You have time to get your bearings before being launched into hell. The first monsters you face are the former humans, the easiest enemies to dispatch, but more importantly, they use the same weapon and ammo type they use. So if for some reason you spend a good amount of your ammo on them, you can still pick some up from their corpses. They also use hit scan weapons, so for whatever reason you thought these might have been friendly NPCs, you'll find out very quickly that they aren't. If you don't know what hit scan is, let me put it to you as simply as I can. In real life, bullets have travel time, even though they feel instant. So in an attempt to recreate the instant feel of those weapons, the game will just check if you're in the line of fire and range of the weapon to calculate whether or not you'll get hit. As opposed to a projectile, which has clear travel time. Speaking of which, the second room is where you first meet the imps. The imp is on top of the balcony and the back of the room, so he can't move towards you, but he can still fire towards your current location. So he'll get to fire his projectile before you get to dispatch him, because the weapon you'll currently be handling won't be able to take him down with 1 or 2 shots. This gives you time to see the fireball, react, and hopefully dodge it. You'll also realize that you don't have to account for vertical aiming. In the next room, you'll have to face him face to face now. But it's still one of the weaker monsters of Doom, so he should go down pretty easy, and then you're on to the exit. With that, you will have learned the most important aspects of Doom. Kill everything in sight, and most importantly, stay on the move. And you may have never even realized it. For a game as brutal as Doom, it's very kind in how it teaches you fundamental rules of the game, while still running and gunning. I'm not trying to say this is the greatest level ever designed or anything. Many great games have subtle teaching lessons like this, but it is good design, and it will be more important when you start looking at other games of the genre. But for now, let's continue with Doom. Okay, so now we know how to play the game, so let's look at what makes Doom's gameplay fast, aggressive, and exciting. The first thing you might notice is how fast Doom guy moves, especially when you've gotten used to the controls and have run always turned on. The speed is really good for allowing you to make very quick decisions when confronted with a situation you aren't expecting. Item layout is very important. They're often tucked into a corner or in the middle of a pile of baddies. So now if you're taking damage, it's up to you if you want to risk cornering yourself for a chance of survival. Often there's better positions to take if you're willing to run through enemies. Getting cornered is the easiest way to die in Doom. The best way to prevent damage is not by hiding, and the game will actively try to punish you for trying to stand still or ducking into corners. Instead, levels are often built with pillars and arenas with lots of space to move around in. When you're presented with narrow hallways, it's almost always with enemies without projectiles. It also makes very good use of being an FPS. Often the game will take advantage of your limited field of view by spawning enemies behind you or trapping you in arenas where monsters spawn and come from all over. So you need to be on the move but also watch your surroundings. But thanks to its excellent sound design, you have ample time to react to monsters being near you, finding you, firing at you, and dying. Let's have a listen to some of them. But what's speed without any firepower? And Doom Guy has it in spades. The starting pistol is a lackluster in damage and fire rate, but will take out lesser demons like the imps and Simonmen and their sergeants if you want to conserve some ammo for the more powerful weapons. Doom's shotgun is a staple weapon with far more damage than the starting pistol, with a KO ability of taking out the aforementioned monsters and taking out the pinkies with possibly 2 shots. It fires 7 different pellets that can allow you to take out multiple enemies at once. It does have a relatively long cooldown period per shot, so you do have to take that into consideration when fighting a mob of enemies. Next is the chain gun. Using the same ammo as a starting pistol that the Simonmen drop, so you'll likely have a large quantity of ammo for it. With rapid fire potential, you can clear out rooms of monsters without having to worry about silly things like precision or timing, but it's best to keep track of your ammo supply. When things get tough, it's time to look into serious weaponry with the rocket launcher. Capable of dealing indiscriminately high damage on impact coupled with splash damage of the explosion, you can take out many foes or attacking big baddies. Be careful though, when I said indiscriminate, I meant it. Well, what's the point of a sci-fi setting if it didn't include some sci-fi weapons? So the plasma gun has got us covered. Perhaps the most versatile weapon in Doomguy's arsenal, the plasma gun has the highest fire rate in the game, with some pretty nasty damage output too. Despite its high rate of fire, it actually has a long cooldown period between shots if you're trying to pop them off individually. With ammo pretty rare, it's best to save this weapon for the right occasion, but sometimes it's okay to treat yourself to some new age carnage. Finally, we have the BFG is the most powerful weapon in the game and is a legendary weapon in all of gaming. With the biggest delay in firing in the game, the damage is more than worth it, taking out just about every enemy in the game with a single strike. And it's also able to take out crowds with that single blast. Even the boss enemies of Doom are in fear of the BFG. The reason I'm going through each weapon is because it has set the standard for weapon variety that allows for radically different playstyles. Many games later on have the issue of having many weapons that functionally are all the same, but we'll get into that later. Every game after Doom had to at minimum match this arsenal. So every FPS has crazy weapons, and while Doom has a center for firepower, it wouldn't keep that crown for long. Where it really shines is in its enemy design. The easiest monsters you have to deal with are the Simonmen or forming humans. Fairly weak, but with the long range hits kind of weapons, it's best to deal with them before they chip away at you. Next is their commanding officers and the sergeants who carry shotguns. A little tougher and dangerous, but they are a sight for sore eyes. They carry the same shotgun you do, so a nice little ammo refill when you actually take them out. This is probably my favorite enemy in the game, the imps. Mostly known for their fireball, but get too close and you have to deal with their claws. With precision, can be taken out fairly easily, but with the game willing to send out dozens at you, there are no pushovers. Now for our first enemy without a projectile, the big pinkies are far more aggressive with a large health pool. As previously stated, it takes a minimum of 2 shotgun blasts to get rid of these guys, so don't miss. Easier said than done, especially with its quick erratic movement, and its invisible twin, the Spectre. And for another projectile this enemy, the Lost Souls, making themselves the projectile by launching at you. The Caco Demons are the next, with the largest health pool of the regular enemies. With their slow movement speed and being pushed back by enemy fire, they're somewhat easier to handle, but are very dangerous despite their hideously cute design. Their fireballs will deal on average more than twice the damage of the imps. Now it's time for the big boys to enter the arena. And the Barons of Hell, often coming in pair, are the boss of the first episode and mage scattered around the levels. Extremely mean and with a high health pool and low pain chance. A mechanic where when the enemy is hit, there's a chance they will enter the pain state and will not be allowed to take any actions for a period of time. And this can be essentially used to make them a wimp. With a little bit of charge up with the green blast, they deal heavy damage if not dodged, tripling in damage output to the imps. The Cyber Demons are perhaps the most iconic enemy of the Doom series and is used on the cover of Doom 2. The boss of the Shores of Hell. Those proud demon towers over every end in the game. Not just physically, but with the most health in the game. Armed with the nasty rocket launcher with very little cooldown, you'll have to be pretty quick to dodge his attacks while fighting back with your own. Lastly, we have the mastermind bad everything, the Spider Demon. Armed with the mounted super chain gun, this weird looking brain thing will not stop firing until the target is dead or moved out of the way. The only demon with the hit scan weapon. She is incredibly dangerous and will kill the player very quickly if not careful. Okay, so now that we have all the cards on the table, we can finally start diving deeper into what makes this game great and promote aggressive, tactful, and speedy gameplay. One of the most important things that Doom does is try to make the game feel as fair as possible. So here's a list of things that Doom does to make things fair. First, most enemies' projectiles have either a long windup or a long travel time. As you can see here, I realize I'm not going to be able to kill this imp before he fires another shot. So I have time to not only outrun the firebolt, but move out of its trajectory. Even bosses like the Spider Demon have attacks that are completely avoidable. Any damage that you take feels fair because of that, because technically a lot of it is avoidable. Even the hitscan enemies aren't the sharpest shooters, and they're easily dispatched and will drop ammo for you to use. The Spider Demon is the only enemy that ditches this trend, but it is the only one of its kind, and it still gives you a moment to dodge before she unleashes her attack on you. Outside of very few exceptions, the demons play by the same rules as you do. They can actually harm each other and will cause infighting. Not only is this cool, but if enemy projectiles somehow went through other enemies or were blocked by them, it would feel pretty cheap. Other than the Cyber Demon and Spider Demon, all enemies will take splash damage from rockets just like you. There's nothing weird like the enemies being able to clip through something or fire at you when you aren't able to hit them. The Y-axis aim persist for all parties, you and the demons. The only major exception is the damaging flourish not affecting any of the monsters. I can understand why they wouldn't want to do this, especially on levels like E3 M6 and E3 M7 with large stretches of damaging floors. They wouldn't want you to just gather all the demons around and bait them into the floor and then have you win that way. That's not really what they wanted. But it also leads to interesting scenarios where you have the choice to stay safe on non-damaging floors and limit your own movement, or take the risk and move it on anyway while enemies are quickly homing in on you. The concession they could have made is that the zombie men and sergeants would still take damage since they're technically still human, but regardless, along with the aforementioned sound design choices, everything feels like a true challenge of skill because of it. Another important thing is the internal planning developers force you to do. You can't go through the game, especially on the higher difficulties, by just spraying and praying. By mixing enemies and what kind of environments you face them in, you'll have to decide for yourself on who to take care of first. Monster closet and ambushes also keep the level fresh when you're trying to find your way out. It makes going through the same ground you just traverse still fun, and also keeps you on your toes the whole time. The worst parts of Doom are really found in many games. You have to clear out all the enemies and you're just running around sometimes in the auto map trying to find the exit. The monster closets that open up only after you completed an objective are a good way of relieving this issue. When playing Doom, it's easy to forget about all of that and just enjoy ripping demons apart and listening to some meaty rock music. Id Software made a technical revolution in 3D action, but they still managed to make a game that's still worth playing today. When developers try to emulate Doom's success, they didn't always get it right. Some might even say never got it as perfectly as they did with Doom. New Doom mods are being released to this day, 26 years and 3 sequels later. I know I spent a lot of time on this game, but it's really important to know some of the smallest details they nailed when looking at later games in the genre. Doom really set the stage for future FPS games in more ways than one, but hopefully now you can kind of understand why people love the game as much as they did, and now we can finally move on to another shooter. It's time to don our HEV suits because we're dropping into Half-Life next. And before anyone asks, I heavily considered doing Quake over Half-Life, but I think Quake's innovations are more in technology than they are in gameplay. The gaming industry wouldn't be the same without Quake, but I'm here more to talk about the game design than technology. And in many ways, Half-Life, by the way, used a heavily modified Quake engine, made a big leap in how modern games are designed today. So let's get into it. If you look at the opening of Half-Life, it stands in stark opposition to the start of Doom. We start off in a tram ride, but notably this isn't a cutscene, at least not in a traditional sense. You can freely move around in your limited space, again giving kind of a safe space for you to get your bearings, but this time you don't have a weapon. Why would you? You're just a research associate on his way to work. You also have a HUD that's only given to you after you put on the HEV suit, which is also the in-game reason why Gordon is able to take so much punishment and move so nimbly. You're never taken out of control for any of this. The game isn't happening to you, it's happening with you. Even the game's inciting event of monsters spilling in from another dimension, the Resonance Cascade, not only happened right in front of you, you were the one who caused it. So, every little bit of information on the game is directly experienced by you and Gordon at the same exact time. Outside of brief loading screen, it truly is a single shot experience. Half-Life cares about every minute detail. There's even a sense of smell and roach AI plugged into the game. If you're really curious about how this works, I encourage you to watch these videos about all the details. Links will be included in the description. I could go on and on about all the little quirks about Half-Life, but we need to get into the actual game design. So let's start with how the game teaches you. You really have time to get used to moving around as Freeman before anything crazy happens, but even once the poop hits the fan, you still have a little bit of time before facing an enemy, or even getting a weapon. But when you do, it's another curveball. You expect for a shooter to not only start you out with a gun, so not only when they don't do that, your first weapon is a melee weapon. Not only is it a melee weapon, it's not something cool like a sword or something ridiculous like a chainsaw. It's a crowbar. Practical, something that one might find lying around the facility. It's not the deadliest weapon in the game either, it's actually quite ineffective for combat. You could whack some head crabs around or maybe some of the possessed scientists, but really, it's most useful for breaking glass or opening boxes. This is the reason why this weapon is so iconic. Amidst the chaos, confusion, and bloodshed, you and Gordon choose to fight back by any means necessary. Even if it's something you could find lying around anywhere, most enemies are often seen attacking other NPCs before you actually have to fight them. The second enemy we come across is the possessed scientist, attacking a security guard. If he kills him, you'll be able to pick up his pistol. We'll have to retrace our steps and see how much havoc has been caused by these invaders and fight some possessed scientists and head crabs along the way. When we get our first new area, we meet a new alien, the Houndai. First, we hear it. Following the good design from Doom, most enemies have a good indication on sound. But maybe none are easily as hurt as the Houndai. With the shortest charge of his attack lasting a full 2 seconds, you have more than enough time to escape its range. They're not too tough either, but you do have to be careful of them in packs. Not long afterwards, we'll meet the first alien slave, later to be known as Vortigaunts in Half-Life 2, and how I'll be referring to them from now on. Anyway, the first of the Vortigaunts bursts up through a door. If you investigate it, it will charge their lightning attack, which you will find has an extremely large range, and once it launches, it's pretty much instant, and pretty much always hits the player. But their lightning charge is incredibly delayed and noticeable. And since they're not the toughest enemies, you can often kill them before the charge up finishes, or move behind the wall to avoid it. So in that sense, they are still very fair enemies. The levels are always designed with them in mind. It also leads to one of the most memorable ones in the game, a turret section filled with only Vortigaunts. Normally, turret sections in FPS games are hot trash because of hit scanners, and sometimes you don't even know what you should be prioritizing or other nonsense. But because the Vortigaunts are so fair and pronounced with their attacks, it's very climactic, and you can often do this section without ever getting hit. I would say once you get to the office complex is when the tutorial ends. At worst, maybe we got hostiles the 5th chapter. I would also like to mention that the training room is completely optional. And even this is probably the most believable way a game like Half-Life can have a tutorial. Half-Life has a higher emphasis on settings and atmosphere than it does raw mechanics. Importantly though, it doesn't abandon mechanics in favor of those two things. Obviously, because of technical limitations, there can't be as many enemies on the screen at once. Even though Half-Life came out 5 years afterwards, using fully 3D models takes a lot more processing power than drawing sprites on the screen. There's also a limitation on fights for in-world reasoning. While it's cool that Zen invaders fight against the HECU operatives, and obviously it makes sense, it does limit the kind of encounters you can have and effectively lowers the strategy from Doom. But what we get in return is worth it. Every action we take and theatrics that take place keep us within Gordon's shoes, and we feel connected to this world, taking great advantage of the first-person perspective. The world keeps track of your actions too, not specifics, but the fact that Gordon will do essentially anything to get out alive. Here's the scientist talking about his killings.
I built the glue-on gun, but I just can't bring myself to use it on a living creature. You don't look as if you have any trouble killing things.
Military talking about Gordon killing other military operatives.
So, who is this guy, Freeman? He said he was at Ground Zero. Science team? You think he was responsible? Sabotage, maybe? Yeah, maybe. All I know for sure is he's been killing my buddies. Oh yeah, he'll pay. He will definitely pay.
And eventually giving up on you because the alien threat is too great. In Doom, there were set pieces to make the game appear hellish, but that often didn't make sense, but it wasn't a priority, so it was a nice add-on. It felt like so many things about Half-Life's world were thought out and properly represented in the game. Headcrabs often hide and travel in air ducts to try and take control over scientists. Even though we never even see it actually happen on screen, we know what's happening to them. Bull squids are often found feeding and will eat the remains of things it takes down, so it makes sense we fight one in a freezer full of meats. The Vortigaunts show much more signs of intelligence, leave and run from danger if they see are losing a fight. HECU will communicate and try to flank the player. Black Ops do the same and make good use of their movement. Once you get to the labs, you can see that maybe this wasn't an accident, as the aliens have been caged up and locked away. There are so many little details that make this game from a good game to a truly great one, and many games try to emulate this form of narrative. They try with what are essentially first-person cutscenes, but the thing is that control is often taken away from you. We will see mixes of that in games to come as FPMs try to be more cinematic, following in Half-Life's footsteps. Now for the third and final game for this episode, we're going to look at Halo Combat Evolved. And for the purposes of this video, we're going to be playing the Master Chief Collection version. Before we get into it, I just want to say that I still enjoy Halo, so when I get into some of the not so good stuff, you won't chew my head off. Halo is one of the most popular and influential shooters, especially for console games. And in a sense, it kind of marks the end of the old school shooter and the beginning of the new school. The beginning of the game is lengthier than the games we covered thus far, but now it's kind of the norm. There's cutscenes, which is thankfully fairly brief. In lower difficulties, you have to run diagnostics, which is essentially a quick tutorial on aiming, moving, HUDs, and shields. It's a little longer than what I would hope, but I'm also okay with it being there. It's very possible this could be someone's first shooter game. Halo takes the Half-Life approach of denying you a weapon at first, but it starts you off in the middle of Asia rather than building towards it. You're not in any real danger, but definitely feels dangerous. And seeing the UNSC crew getting beat by the Covenant makes you want to fight back. We have to watch another cutscene before we see our first weapon. Thankfully, and strangely, the starting pistol in Halo is one of the best weapons in the game. It's powerful, precise, and you'll often find ammo for it. So, when the first enemies you meet, the grunts, you get to kill them fairly easily, possibly with a single shot or melee attack. The change from having a powerful melee option is very deliberate, and an important change to the game. Now, melee will kill a grunt fairly easily, or finish off a kill on stronger enemies. You can even sneak behind powerful enemies like the Elite and kill them off in one hit. When you pick up a second weapon, likely the assault rifle, they'll face an Elite alongside some grunts. I think it's interesting that the game was willing to throw you one of the toughest enemies early on, but I guess it's also easier because you're aided by the Marines, so it shouldn't be too bad. There's occasionally waypoints that lead you to an objective, which I'm not personally a fan of. The whole game kind of suffers of wait, where am I syndrome, which each level has varied design. The levels in itself have very samey design for walls and corridors, and while I wouldn't say it's easy to get lost, it happens more than it does in Half-Life, where levels were very linear but also good visually. You didn't need indicators to lead you to the next path. I particularly like this electric bolt to help put your eyes on the air duct. Doom at least had the automap feature for moments of wait, where am I? Cortana, your AI buddy, will often talk to you, tell you certain things about the level, where to go and what to do. Although sometimes she does say some moronic things.
This cave is not a natural formation.
It doesn't interrupt the flow of the game by pausing for her to say something, so it's actually one of the best kind of companions you can have. She also gets the contact with the UNSC for you and lets the story continue and theatrics play out during gameplay like Half-Life. While every level begins and ends with a cutscene, and usually maybe one or two in the middle, there's still a lot of game for you to play around that. The first thing you might have noticed about Halo is its non-traditional health system, arguably its biggest change. I say non-traditional, but it quickly became the norm after this because, and I don't want to put this lightly, it allows for bad game design. Halo is not a poorly designed game. All of its systems have been thought out and it's still an enjoyable experience. So let me explain how it works. Halo's health system works on shields and regular health. Regular health works exactly how you might think. If it drops to 0, you're done, and to refill it, you just need to find health packs. In a traditional health system, the shield would be a bonus to your health, and probably reduce incoming damage. In Halo, shields are a permanent first layer that once depleted will come back fully if you maintain a brief amount of time without getting hit. What this allows is if you make an unwise decision in combat, the consequences won't be as severe as long as your normal health isn't touched. What this also allows is for enemies to have essentially undodgeable attacks and for it to be quote unquote okay. I can tell why they wouldn't want to do this, because the Covenant weapons are usable by the Chief, and if they couldn't hit anything moving, then that would feel pretty bad. I don't think it had to be this way. For example, the Cyber Demon and Doom use the rockets you do, but they're still dodgeable. The problem is the Chief is slow compared to the Doom guy, whereas before you could run literal circles around your enemies, now you're basically at the same pace. There are still consequences to being hit, as you will die significantly easier if you're on your last sliver of health, but it's not as severe. There is also positives to having shields. Game designers can design around the fact that you have at least a full shield's worth of health. That means the difficulty curve can smooth out, and they won't have to guess on what your health is. However, in combination with your slower movements, it leads to a more defensive and slower game. Often the best option is to take it slow and pick your enemies while you pop in and out of cover while waiting for the damage you took to recover. This is mostly okay in Halo, but I'm not okay with in other games that have come afterwards. There are some rather unfortunate moments like this occasionally, and that sucks. It's a crutch for bad games if not utilized properly. It lets the game smack you around a while before you figure it out. By figure it out, I mean you realize the hit scan and you barely see that was bodying you. At this point, you might have also noticed you can only carry 2 weapons at a time. Most PC games were played on a keyboard and mouse, so switching between multiple weapons was quick and easy. Not only could you use the numbers up top, but you could use the mouse wheel to scroll. Console games are only playable with controllers, so you had a limited number of buttons you could use. Games like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark had a button to switch weapons, but a lot of your inventory was accessed by the pause menu. This slowed the game down considerably when you wanted to access specific items. Perfect Dark also did include a quick menu to alleviate this. It wasn't perfect, but it was an option. So only having 2 weapons available at one time and being able to swap between them really fast sounds like a reasonable trade-off if pulled out correctly. I will say that Halo succeeds with this system, but not because of it, but in spite of it. In order for a system like this to work, every gun needs to be roughly equal in power, and also be unique enough to warrant its inclusion. Otherwise, you'll try to hold on to your favorite weapon while occasionally starts for ammo for it, so you can just get to use it in spurts while you fumble around using the best weapon that's currently available. This is why I theorize the starting pistol is so powerful and precise. It can really handle any situation. While I will say the balance for weapons is better than most games, there are still some trashy ones like the assault rifle, but even then its massive ammo count and high rate of fire is useful for taking on the infection form floods. Levels that include specialized weapons like the sniper or rocket are where you can see the system failing clearer. Since these weapons don't carry much ammo and they're very niche, you have to rely on your other weapon, likely the pistol, for the other encounters if you want to use them. Then, if you decide to drop the rocket launcher for a more consistent weapon, you might regret it later. It also kind of tells you the answer to certain problems, sometimes literally, as opposed to you figuring it out on your own. So there is a form of strategy in Halo, but I would credit it more to its great enemy design. The Covenant are some of the most enjoyable enemies to fight in any FPS game, and it's thanks to the time and effort that Bungie put into them. For most of the game, you'll be playing against grunts, jackals, and the elites. But because of their AI and the different abilities they have, they'll hardly get stale. Grunts are weak, cowardly, awkward, and just overall pathetic. But they're sneaky bastards too. They have no shields and minimal health, so you can take them out in very few shots, but they have annoying weaponry. They'll carry either a plasma pistol, needler, rarely a fuel rod. They'll man turrets, and they're also very willing to throw grenades. Grunts will cower in fear of the chief, especially when their commanding officer is defeated, and will literally run away from you. In quieter situations, instead of patrolling like the jackals and elites, they'll be sleeping. They'll also run more recklessly towards the player when they have a large group behind them, kind of cementing them as the grunt. Their voices are easily recognizable and often call out a grenade toss.
Down in front!
Side note, I really like the way plasma grenades work, and that you'll only ever have to deal with plasma grenades. They have a longer fuse than the frag grenades, have a big blue flare and stick, so whenever a Covenant throws one, you'll have time to react, see it coming, and know exactly where it is. The Grunts are also hesitant about shooting and will never even charge their plasma pistol, which will deplete your entire shield in one shot. Jackals are quieter and crouchier than the Grunts. They have a portable handheld shield, which is not as good as a full body shield since they can still be taken out in a single shot with the right angle, but will render weapons like the Needler useless. They will fire more ferociously than the Grunts, who will make a tactical roll out of danger instead of running, flailing, and the pathetic dives that the Grunts do. They will also occasionally fully charge their plasma pistols, which makes them a very scary opponent, especially when paired with other enemies. Their voice clips are a lot less pronounced, but thanks to their bright colorful shield, they are still very noticeable. Thankfully, they don't throw grenades ever, so sound design isn't portrayed here. They will, however, still act cowardly and run in the face of danger. A little more elegant than the Grunts, but nonetheless. Finally, we have the Elites. Their behavior and health mostly match the player. They have full body shields and health that must be depleted to defeat them. They're brave, cunning, and have a large variety of weapons and abilities, and their movement is unparalleled to even your own. They also have a melee attack that rivals your own, so running them down isn't always recommended, and when they get aggressive, they can be very dangerous. That's just their regular melee attack too. They also carry energy swords from time to time that will take you down in a single hit. They won't just chase you down mindlessly either when they have it. They know when a situation is too dangerous to rush in, but also are aggressive when they see an opening. They sidestep and backpedal while firing to avoid your attacks, and evasive rolls to cover a lot of ground. They will also show frustration when losing a battle, which is also often their downfall. And again, they have a very audible and iconic sound clip for recognizing, attacking, and dying. The last of the Covenant are the Hunters, and are always found in pairs. They have strong armor and will either run the player down or fire their destructive fuel rod cannons. It's very easy to waste ammo on them because their armor will literally bounce off your attacks. So it's necessary to attack them in weak points, where they will go down easier. I know I didn't cover every enemy in Half-Life, so it feels unbalanced, but I do want to be fair to Halo when it does something very, very well, and what I consider the saving grace of the campaign, alongside the vehicular combat. Particularly, I found the ghost sections to be great fun. I would also be remiss and not mention Halo's fantastic music cues. They're nothing short of fantastic to play through. Halo overall has more emphasis on cinematics. Every level has multiple cutscenes, but thankfully the quality of the cutscenes balance on gameplay and enough real-time theatrics to make it okay. Cutscenes are a tool for a designer and sometimes a reward system for the game, but it's a delicate balance. It's telling that it's in final moments the game is in a warthog thrill ride instead of a large, climactic shootout. This isn't a knock against the game, as the actual section is very fun and tense, but it shows that the game has different priorities and goals. The goal wasn't just to make a compelling shooter, but to make a compelling experience through the outlet of a shooter. Thankfully, all the shooting mechanics were in place to make a great game. I think I've kept you here long enough, so let's wrap this up. Single-player first-person shooters work best when you have a large knowledge about how their systems work. The actual guns themselves don't matter as much as you might think. Of course they have to feel good and be varied, but the linchpin to it all is the enemy design, and I think Halo was a perfect example of this. Despite the player's immediate abilities being nerfed, a rather forgiving health system, and more instances of unavoidable damage, it's still an enjoyable game to play. Sound design also plays a large factor in all the games featured. Due to your limited vision, being able to hear your enemies is often just as important as being able to see them. People also on average react faster to audio cues, so when you have to make fast twitch decisions, this will come in handy more than anything else. Each game you looked at, the player character has been nerfed in speed. If Doomguy is incredibly fast, Gordon Freeman is fairly quick, and Master Chief was relatively slow in comparison. Many games try to copy Half-Life's theatrics, but with the overuse of cutscenes and take away control from the player. This makes the game weaker. There are not many moments that can match the Resident's Cascade, the initial tentacle attack, or first entering Zen in the first place. This is because everything is happening with you, which makes the world of Half-Life feel more alive and believable. Even though Halo cinematics are quite good and sometimes very effective, that isn't the case for every game that eventually try to emulate its success. Up to this point, FPS games had its clones and cemented itself as a new genre, but there also has to be a point of decline. Next time, we'll be tackling some more modern warfare, and with that, I'll see you in the next mission.
Hello, sir. Got one!